I buried Thomas in September, and by October, I understood what the other widows had tried to tell me. Sympathy doesn't pay for firewood. The morning after his funeral, Mrs. Miller brought a casserole. By November, she'd stopped coming. That's how long grief is allowed to last in a mountain settlement where everyone's barely surviving. Themselves, I didn't blame her. I'd have done the same. My cabin felt smaller every day, like grief was a physical thing taking up space, pushing out air and hope. I woke at dawn from habit, boiled coffee grounds I'd already used twice, rationed bread that would run out by week's end. My hands were chapped and red from washing other people's clothes for pennies. The cold seeped through the walls no matter how I chinked them. I'd count my supplies by candlelight. 3 jars of preserves, half a sack of flour. Wood enough for 2 weeks if I was careful. The math never worked. Winter was coming faster than my resources could stretch. Thomas had been a good man. Not a prosperous one, but good. We'd always been just scraping by. One bad season from disaster. When the fever took him, he left me with nothing but debts and dignity. I'd kept the dignity, sold everything else. The settlement women brought what they called extras charity, disguised as kindness. I accepted it with thanks and shame in equal measure. The men were worse. Awkward offers couched as concern. Mrs. Hartley, you shouldn't be alone. Mrs. Hartley, a woman needs protection. What they meant was, I need a cook, a maid, a warm body in my bed. I refused them all with quiet politeness. My wedding ring sat on the windowsill. I'd removed it months ago, but couldn't bring herself to sell it. Couldn't bring myself to wear it either. It caught the morning light and mocked me. The last piece of a life that felt like someone else's memory. I wondered when I'd started measuring my life in jars and wood cords instead of joy and purpose. When survival became a luxury I couldn't afford. When did I stop being Margaret Hartley, person, and become Widow Hartley? Problem: the first snow fell on a Tuesday. I watched it through my one good window and did calculations in my head that all ended the same way. I wouldn't make it to spring alone. Pride is expensive. I'd been so proud of managing on my own, of not needing anyone, of being strong. Now alone felt less like freedom and more like a slow erasure. Like I was fading out of existence one cold day at a time. And by March, there'd be nothing left but an empty cabin and unpaid debts. The settlement meeting was Thursday. I'd go, I'd listen. I'd do what I'd never thought I'd do. I'd consider the offers I'd been refusing. Winter didn't care about my pride, and pride doesn't keep you warm. The trading post smelled like wood smoke and wet wool. 20 people crammed into a space meant for 10, discussing winter preparations and supply sharing. I stood near the back, anonymous in the crowd. That's when I first saw Jacob Harrison. He came in quietly, snow still melting on his shoulders, dark hair, careful eyes, clothes worn but clean. He removed his hat and waited to be noticed instead of demanding attention. Something about that stillness caught me. "This here's Jacob Harrison," announced Mr. Keegan. "Been prospecting up in the high country, looking to winter lower this season." Men nodded greetings. Women assessed him with that quick calculation we all did: single or married. Prospects or problems. He met their gazes steadily, but didn't linger. When his eyes passed over me, something unspoken flickered between us. Recognition. Maybe, or just 2 lonely people acknowledging each other's loneliness. I watched him through the meeting. He listened more than he spoke. When Mrs. Miller offered him coffee, he thanked her with genuine warmth. His hands were rough from work, but clean. He stood like a man who knew exactly who he was and didn't need to prove it. After the meeting, he approached me near the door. "Mrs. Hartley, isn't it? It is? Jacob Harrison." He didn't offer his hand, reading correctly that I wouldn't want to take it. "Keegan mentioned you might know about firewood sources. I'm new to this elevation." I studied him. "Men don't offer help for free. There's always a cost. Dead Pine Grove about 2 miles northeast. Take the deer trail past Walker's Creek." "Much obliged." He paused. "If you need help hauling, I'd be glad to repay the information. I manage fine alone. I'm sure you do." His tone held no challenge, just acceptance. "Offer stands anyway." He left then, and I walked home replaying the conversation, annoyed that I was thinking about him. More annoyed that I'd noticed the steadiness in his voice, the respect in his distance, the way he'd believed me when I said I managed alone. 3 days later, he appeared at my door. No preamble, no pretense, just, "I'm looking for a winter partnership. Mrs. Hartley. I have a cabin. Hunting skill. Firewood sources. Need someone who can cook. Mend. Manage a household. Fair trade of labor." He paused, and I watched him gather courage. "Or, if you'd consider it, a marriage. Practical arrangement. I won't lie about romance or pretty words. Just 2 people helping each other survive. No pretenses about what it is or isn't." I should have been offended. Instead, I found myself calculating his cabin versus mine, his hunting versus my sewing. 2 people versus 1 against the cold. I'd learned to read men quickly after Thomas died. The ones who wanted a cook. The ones who wanted something else entirely. The ones who wanted to save me so I'd be grateful. Jacob Harrison didn't fit any category I knew, and that unsettled me more than if he had. I need time to think. Of course, Sunday I'll be at the trading post. Sunday, I agreed. I watched him walk away, straight-backed and unhurried, and realized I'd already made up my mind. Survival trumped sentiment. It had to. I found him Sunday morning at the trading post. He looked up when I entered, hope and fear mixing in his eyes. "I accept the marriage." My voice was steady. "But I need terms clear. Separate sleeping arrangements until we're both ready. Fair division of labor, honest communication. No assumptions." Relief washed over his face. "Agreed. All of it." We married Thursday. Preacher Miller officiated. 2 neighbors witnessed. No flowers. No celebration. I wore my only good dress, smelling of cedar from storage. His one nice shirt still showed the mend marks from whoever had sewn it before. The wind outside rattled the church windows like it was trying to get in. When he took my hand to say the vows, his grip was steady. Mine trembled slightly. The words felt more like a business contract than a promise. But maybe that was honest. Maybe this was what marriage looked like when you stripped away everything but survival. Afterward, we walked 3 miles up the mountain to his cabin. I carried my possessions in 2 bags, everything I owned in the world. The walk was quiet but not uncomfortable. I remembered carrying my hope chest to Thomas's place 6 years ago, so full of dreams about what our life would be. Such different expectations then. Such different woman now. His cabin appeared through the pines. Smaller than mine, but solid. One room. Well built. The stove looked maintained, the few possessions organized with care. A shelf held 3 books, worn from reading. Thomas never read. "It's not much," he said, and I heard apology in his voice. "It's sound. That matters more than size." That first evening was awkward negotiation. Where to put my things, how to navigate shared space. Setting up separate sleeping areas, him by the stove, me by the far wall. The geography of a marriage without intimacy. I lay awake that first night, listening to his breathing across the room. The strangeness of another person after 2 years of silence. I couldn't decide if I'd made the most sensible or most foolish decision of my life. Maybe both. Maybe survival required a bit of foolishness. His cabin smelled different than mine, pine and leather and something else I couldn't name. It smelled lived in by someone who cared. That surprised me more than I wanted to admit. Morning came too quickly. I woke to find the fire already built, coffee already boiling, him already outside splitting wood. The rhythm of a life I hadn't agreed to yet was already pulling me along. I rose, tied my apron, and began. December taught me the rhythm of living with someone I barely knew. We woke at dawn. I'd make breakfast while he tended the animals. We'd eat in comfortable silence. Then he'd leave for hunting or trapping while I managed the cabin. Evenings were quiet mending by firelight, him carving or reading, both of us aware of the other, in ways neither acknowledged. The first week, I noticed small things. How he made coffee strong, the way I liked it without asking. How he always washed his plate immediately, never leaving work for me. How he moved through the cabin with consideration, never crowding my space. He brought extra firewood before I asked. I mended his shirt with hidden care, reinforcing seams he hadn't noticed. When he thanked me, I deflected. "It's the arrangement." "Still, thank you." Days became weeks. I stopped counting them. Started counting other things instead. How many times he smiled. How many times I almost smiled back. One morning, wildflowers appeared on the table. Small winter blooms. Carefully arranged. No note, no explanation. I stared at them, conflicted. Was this kindness or expectation, generosity or manipulation? I arranged them in a tin cup anyway. Told myself it was just being practical, not letting them die. The ice between us was melting, and I wasn't sure I wanted it to. Evening came, and he asked about my sewing. I showed him how to thread a needle properly. He pricked his finger and cursed softly. I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound surprised us both. "There," he said, smiling. "That's the first time I've heard you laugh. Haven't had much to laugh about." "No, I suppose not." He studied the needle. "Will you teach me? Properly seems a useful skill." So I did. We sat by firelight, me guiding his hands, him concentrating with amusing intensity. When he managed his first passable stitch, he looked at me with such pride I felt something crack in my chest. I caught him watching me sometimes. Not invasive, just attentive. The way he studied how I organized things. How I hummed while working without realizing it. What was he looking for? What did he see? "You make things beautiful," he said one evening. Gesturing to the cabin, I'd added small touches, a cloth on the shelf, dried herbs hanging, his books arranged just so. "Even in poverty, you find ways to make beauty. Beauty doesn't cost money, just attention. Not everyone knows that. Something in his tone made me look up, but his expression was unreadable. One morning, I realized I'd set 2 plates without thinking, poured 2 coffees automatically. When had his presence become assumed rather than tolerated? When had I started listening for his footsteps, missing them when he was gone too long? That night, I caught myself smiling at something he'd said. Actually smiling. The realization hit like cold water. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning to live, and that terrified me more than winter ever could. I wondered when silence with him had started feeling different than silence alone. There's a difference between sharing space and sharing life. We were somewhere in between, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to stay there or push forward or pull back. Thomas and I had loved each other, but it was always complicated by want and need and never having enough. With Jacob, everything felt simpler. Or maybe that simplicity was what scared me. Maybe I didn't trust simple. Maybe I didn't think I deserved it. The blizzard hit in January. 3 days of wind that howled like something alive. Snow that erased the world beyond our walls. We were trapped inside together with nowhere to escape. The first day. The tension was thick. Too close, too much proximity. I felt him everywhere, even when he wasn't moving. The cabin that had felt spacious suddenly seemed tiny. By evening, the usual silence felt different. Heavier. He stoked the fire and said, "Tell me about your life before. If you want." I shouldn't have answered. Should have deflected, like always. Instead, words came. I was married 3 years. Thomas was good man, poor, but good. He got sick 2 winters ago. Fever. Nothing I did helped. I stopped, surprised I'd said even that much. "I'm sorry." "Are you—" The bitterness escaped before I could stop it. Everyone's sorry. No one means it. They just don't know what else to say. "You're right." He didn't look offended. "I don't know what to say, but I am sorry you suffered." Something about his honesty broke something in me. I loved him, but I was so tired. Tired of being poor, of watching him work himself to death, of never having enough. When he died, I stopped, horrified, relieved. The word hung between us. I nodded, unable to speak. "That doesn't make you heartless, Margaret. Makes you human." Tears came then. I hadn't cried since the funeral. What kind of woman feels relief when her husband dies? The kind who's been carrying too much for too long. He moved closer, but didn't touch me. The kind who's honest enough to admit it. I wiped my eyes roughly. "Your turn. Tell me something true." He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I had a family once. Parents, cousins, aunts and uncles. Money came into it, inheritance, property disputes. I watched people I loved become strangers, fighting over dollars and cents like it mattered more than blood. What happened? I walked away. From all of it, couldn't bear to watch anymore. His voice held old pain. Money changes people, shows you who they really are underneath all the pretending. I understood then. His poverty wasn't failure. It was choice. You chose this. I chose honest poverty over corrupt wealth. Yes, we sat closer after that, not touching, but connected. The storm howled outside while inside, something quieter was building. "You're not hard-hearted, Margaret," he said softly. "You're honest. That's much rarer." Why was it easier to confess my worst thoughts to a man I'd known 2 months than it had been to tell my husband of 3 years? Maybe because Jacob hadn't known the woman I was supposed to be. He only knew who I actually was. That night. The cold was bitter. Separate sleeping seemed foolish. We shared warmth, different blankets, same space, the intimacy of trust. I fell asleep listening to his breathing, and for the first time since Thomas died. I wasn't afraid of the dark. Morning came gently. Awkwardness transformed into something tender. We shared coffee in comfortable silence. I felt seen in a way I'd never experienced. Not judged, not measured, just seen and accepted. The storm broke on the third day. We dug out together, working in tandem like we'd been partners for years instead of weeks. When he smiled at me over the shovel, something in my chest cracked open. Oh no, I thought. Oh no. This isn't practical anymore. February came with wolves in crisis. Jacob returned from hunting one afternoon, blood on the snow behind him. His leg was gashed badly, his face pale with pain and blood loss. I saw it, and something in me switched from wife to nurse in an instant. Inside. Now. No panic. Just action. I'd nursed Thomas through his final illness. My hands remembered what my mind tried to forget. I heated water, found clean cloth. This will hurt. I have to clean it. Do it. The wound was deep but clean. No infection yet. I cleaned it with whiskey, heard his sharp intake of breath. Hold still. I've got you. Trust me. The words came automatically, and I realized I meant them. Trust me. I'd sewn flesh before. Hated it then. Hated it now. But my hands stayed steady even as my heart raced. 12 stitches. Each one careful. He gripped the table edge, but didn't cry out. You're good at this. Practice I wish I'd never had. The next days were role reversal. Him vulnerable. Me in control. I managed everything: his care, the cabin, the animals. Exhaustion became my constant companion, but I pushed through. I'd survived widowhood. I could survive anything. During recovery, he watched me with new eyes, really seeing my capability, my strength without hardness, how I never complained about the extra work, never made him feel like a burden. You never complain, he said one evening, not once, about the cold, the work, the poverty. Why, I thought about it. Complaining doesn't change anything. Making the best of what you have does. Something shifted in his expression, almost like revelation. Like I'd just answered a question I didn't know he was asking. It should have comforted me. Instead, it made me nervous. As he healed, he taught me to shoot. You need to protect yourself when I can't. I managed 2 years alone. I know, but now you don't have to. He positioned the rifle in my hands. Partners, watch out for each other. Partners. The word settled over me like a blanket. Not rescuer and rescued. Not provider and dependent. Partners. When Thomas was dying, I'd felt helpless, useless, every skill inadequate. With Jacob, I felt capable. Maybe the difference was him, trusting me to save him. Or maybe the difference was me, finally trusting myself. Fear is strange. It can paralyze or galvanize. I'd spent 2 years paralyzed by fear of life continuing without Thomas. Now, faced with losing Jacob, I discovered I'd fight like hell to keep him. He healed quickly, his strength returning. But something had changed between us. He watched me differently now, more intensely, more purposefully, like he was making a decision. What did he see when he looked at me? And why did I care so much? Late February. I found the trunk, deep cleaning under his bed. My hand hit something solid. I pulled it out, fine leather. Completely out of place in our humble cabin. Locked. My heart hammered. What secrets was he keeping? I tried the lock. Felt wrong, but I couldn't stop. What was he hiding? Was he a criminal? A thief? Had I married a stranger who'd been lying about? Everything, every good moment replayed through suspicious lens. The careful watching. The questions about my character. The way he'd studied how I handled poverty. Had it all been manipulation, I remembered a traveling salesman years ago who'd seemed kind. Turned out to be running from debts he'd stolen. My usual wariness came flooding back with vengeance. When he returned, I was holding the trunk. What is this? What aren't you telling me? His face went pale. Margaret, don't. Just tell me the truth. Are you a criminal? Am I harboring a thief? Have these months been a lie? No. Nothing like that. I promise. He reached for me. Stopped. It's something I needed to be sure about before I showed you. Sure about what? Please. Trust me. A few more days. Trust. I laughed bitterly. You want trust while keeping secrets. I know how it looks, but I swear, it's nothing bad. Just complicated. I'll explain. Soon. I promise. When? Tomorrow. I need one more night. Please. I stared at him, trying to read truth or lies in his face. Tomorrow, not a day more. That night, I packed my things, everything I'd brought, carefully folded, ready to carry out at dawn. I'd married a stranger who kept secrets. I'd been a fool to trust, to hope, to let myself care. I sat in the dark, replaying every moment, every kindness, every look. Was any of it real? The worst part wasn't the secrets. It was realizing how much I'd come to care. If he'd meant nothing, I could walk away easily. But he meant everything. And that made staying or leaving equally impossible. I'd promised myself after Thomas died, never again would I be blindsided. Never again would I be the fool who didn't see the truth. And here I was, having married a stranger who kept locked trunks under his bed. But then I remembered his gentleness when I'd cried, the way he'd let me care for him when he was injured, teaching me to shoot so I'd be safe. The wildflowers on the table. Even if he had secrets, what I'd felt was real. What we'd built was real. The question was, did I trust myself enough to trust him I'd run once before? from the possibility of pain. Lost 2 years to safety. Not again. Slowly, I unpacked. Each item was a decision. Each decision an act of faith. Trust is easy when nothing's at stake. Real trust happens when you could be destroyed and you choose to believe anyway. That's not stupidity. That's courage. Or maybe they're the same thing. Dawn came. He was already awake, red-eyed, like he hadn't slept. "I'm staying," I said, "but you owe me truth. Whatever it is, we face it together. That's the deal." Relief washed over him. "Tomorrow. I'll show you everything tomorrow. And then you can decide, truly decide, if you want this life." "I've already decided. I'm here. Now you decide if you're going to honor that with honesty." We stood in the cold cabin, two people who'd built something fragile and precious, hoping it was strong enough to survive truth. He led me deep into the mountains at dawn. I followed despite fear, despite doubt. Because I'd already made my choice, and the walking was just formality. The trail wound through dense pines, up paths I'd never known existed. My breath came in visible clouds. His shoulders were tense ahead of me. Then, through the trees, something impossible. A mansion, stone and timber, grand but not garish, fitting the mountains like it had grown there. I stopped walking. "What is this?" He turned, and his face held fear I'd never seen before. "This is my family home. I inherited it 5 years ago, left it empty. I couldn't bear to live in it after what I'd seen it do to the people I loved." The words didn't make sense. "You inherited?" "My parents died. Left me everything. The house, the land, money. I watched my cousins, my aunts and uncles, people I'd loved my whole life, turn into strangers, fighting over pieces of it." His voice broke. "The things they said, the things they did. Money showed me who they really were." I walked closer to the mansion, trying to understand. "So you ran?" I ran. Couldn't watch anymore. Couldn't be part of it. He gestured helplessly. "I've been living in that cabin for 5 years. Couldn't bring myself to live here. And the trunk, family documents, deeds, proof of ownership. He stopped, gathered courage. I needed to know if someone could love me without knowing about this. If someone would choose a hard life with me, not an easy life with my money. Understanding crashed over me. "You tested me." "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I watched you for 3 months. Watched how you handled poverty, how you never complained, how you made beauty from nothing, how you cared for me when I was injured, how you stayed even when you were afraid. I had to know. I had to know you were real." Anger flared. Then understanding followed. "You tested me, but I tested you too, without knowing it, and we both passed." He looked stunned. "You're not angry?" I thought about it, really thought. I should be. Maybe I will be later. But right now, I gestured to the mansion, to him, to everything between us. Honest love requires honest foundations. We built ours. In that cabin. This. I touched the stone wall. This is just wood and stone. Margaret, we keep both places. The decision came clearly. The cabin reminds us what matters. This provides for our future, for children, for community, for the life we'll build, but we live in both. We remember in the cabin, we serve in the mansion. That's how wealth doesn't corrupt. By never forgetting what it's like without it. Tears filled his eyes. I was so afraid you'd hate me. You showed me what I'm capable of. That I can love again, trust again, be strong again. I took his hand. The poverty taught me things prosperity never could. You gave me that gift, even if you gave it through deception. I never meant to hurt you. I know. You meant to protect yourself, to find someone real. I smiled. Surprising myself, you found her, and she found you. The test worked both ways. Character revealed in scarcity matters more than promises made in plenty. We'd had nothing and made everything. Now we had everything, and I knew we'd remember nothing. That's the kind of wisdom poverty teaches and prosperity never could. We stood in that grand hallway, our worn boots on polished floors, and made our real vows. Not the ones spoken in church, but the ones spoken here to remember, to stay grounded. To use wealth as a tool, not an identity. To never forget what matters. Partners, he asked, his voice uncertain. Partners, I answered, meaning it more than any words I'd ever spoken. I understood then what he'd needed. Not a woman who wanted his money, but a woman who'd choose him in poverty and stay with him in wealth. A woman whose character wouldn't change with circumstances. And I'd needed testing too. Needed to prove to myself that I was enough. Exactly as I was. That I could build a life from nothing. That I could love again without losing myself. We walked into that mansion together, hand in hand. Not him bringing me into his world, but us creating our world together. Equals partners. Both tested, both proven, both choosing this life with clear eyes and honest hearts. We've been married 2 years now, and I've learned something about treasure. It's not what you think it is. It's never what you think it is. We live between both places. Weeks in the cabin for grounding, time in the mansion for community service and family planning. Each home serves its purpose. Each reminds us of different truths. The cabin is where we go to remember. Where we make coffee in chipped cups and sleep close to the fire and recall what matters. We still set wildflowers on the table, still mend our own clothes, still find beauty in simplicity. It's our truth teller, that small cabin. When the mansion starts feeling normal, we return there to remember it's not. The mansion we use for others. Community gatherings, helping young couples start out. Planning for children who'll know both wealth and want. Money is a tool. We use it well because we remember when we didn't have it. That memory keeps us honest. I'm carrying our first child now, planning the nursery in the mansion. But knowing we'll teach them in the cabin, they'll know both worlds. Value both. Be trapped by neither. Young couples come to us for advice. They see the mansion and think we have answers. I bring them to the cabin instead. Show them the 2 plates, the simple stove, the books read by firelight. Test yourself by how you treat people when you think they can't give you anything you want. I tell them, that's where truth lives. Not in what you say when it matters, but in what you do when you think it doesn't. Jacob's transformation has been quieter than mine, from wounded to healed, from secret keeper to open partner. He needed to know he was enough without wealth, needed to prove he could survive, could be loved, could build something real from nothing. The cabin gave him that. My transformation was different, from isolation to partnership, from fear to trust, from survival to thriving. I'd spent 2 years believing I had to be strong alone. The cabin taught me that strength can be shared, that asking for help isn't weakness, that 2 people choosing each other every day is more powerful than 1 person enduring alone. I used to think love was about grand gestures, dramatic moments, fate, and destiny. Now I know it's about choosing someone every day, in the small moments, especially when it's hard. Setting 2 plates, making coffee the way they like it, standing beside them when truth is complicated. The test wasn't the poverty. The test was whether we could be honest him with his fear of being loved for money, me with my fear of being vulnerable again. We passed because we chose truth over safety, because we built our foundation in reality, not fantasy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he'd told me from the start. We'd have missed those 3 months. We'd have missed learning who we really were, stripped of everything but character. The hard way taught us things the easy way never could. Character revealed in scarcity matters more than promises made in plenty. We proved that to each other, to ourselves. Last night, I found Jacob at the cabin chopping wood, even though we have people who could do it now. "Why?" I asked. He smiled, that quiet smile I'd fallen in love with. "So I remember." I picked up the water bucket, we have running water in the mansion, and carried it from the creek. So I remember too. That's the life we built. That's the treasure we found. Not in the mansion's walls, but in the cabin's lessons. Not in wealth, but in knowing we don't need it to be whole. We go back to remind ourselves we are enough. We always were. The rest is just blessing on top of truth. I set 2 plates in the mansion's grand dining room the same way I did in that humble cabin. The ritual unchanged by circumstances. What matters hasn't changed. We have. And that's the real treasure. Not the test passed or the mansion inherited. Not the poverty endured or the wealth received. But the knowing, bone deep, absolute, unshakable knowing that we chose each other when there was nothing to gain, that we built our love on honest foundations, that we're partners not because we need each other to survive, but because we choose each other to thrive. The cabin taught us what matters. The mansion lets us share it. And between the two, we've built something no amount of money could buy, a life true to who we really are. That's the lesson. That's the wisdom. Test yourself by how you act when no one's watching, when nothing's at stake, when there's nothing to gain. That's where you find out who you really are. And when you find someone who sees that truth and chooses you anyway, that's treasure. That's everything. That's enough.